The late afternoon sun slanted through the pines, casting long shadows across the narrow dirt road as Eleanor Morgan's truck labored up the final stretch of mountain. Dust billowed behind her like a veil, obscuring the path she'd taken. Beside her, Max, an aging golden retriever with a graying muzzle, pressed his nose against the window, his warm breath fogging the glass. "Almost there, old boy," Ellie murmured, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. At 57, Eleanor hadn't planned on starting over. She'd expected to be planning retirement trips with Richard, her husband of 30 years. Instead, she'd found herself signing divorce papers after discovering him with a woman half his age, his graduate research assistant. 3 decades of marriage erased in a moment of devastating clarity. The truck rounded the final bend, and there it stood, Willow Cabin. The realtor's online listing had called it a rustic retreat with potential. What it actually was, a sagging structure with a roof that dipped precariously in the middle, windows boarded or cracked, a porch that listed dangerously to one side. But something about it had called to her across the digital void. $15,000 from her divorce settlement, an impulsive click, and now it was hers. Ellie parked and sat motionless, doubt washing over her. What had she done? A respected botanist with a PhD didn't just abandon her life to move to the mountains of Oregon on a whim. Yet here she was. "Well, Max, home sweet home." The dog whined softly in response. As they stepped from the truck, the mountain air rushed to greet them, crisp, pine-scented, untainted by city pollution. Max immediately began investigating his new territory, nose to the ground, tail tentatively wagging. Ellie approached the cabin slowly, each step crunching on fallen pine needles. Up close, the cabin revealed unexpected details: intricate woodwork around the eaves, a stone foundation laid with precision, hand-forged hinges on the weathered door. Someone had loved this place once. The key stuck in the lock, requiring a firm jiggle before the door swung open with a protesting creak. Dust motes danced in the beams of light that managed to penetrate the grime-covered windows. The interior was a chaotic museum of abandonment, furniture draped in sheets, boxes stacked haphazardly, debris scattered across warped floorboards. But beneath the disarray, Ellie glimpsed craftsmanship, hand-hewn beams, a stone fireplace with careful masonry, built-in shelves with delicate scrollwork. "Hello there!" The voice startled Ellie so badly she nearly tripped over Max. An elderly woman stood at the bottom of the porch steps, a ceramic dish in her hands. "Didn't mean to frighten you. I'm Grace Wilkins. Live half a mile down the road." Grace was tall and slender, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her face was deeply lined, but her eyes were sharp and clear. She held up the dish. "Brought you some apple pie. Welcome tradition." "That's very kind. I'm Eleanor Morgan. Everyone calls me Ellie. And this is Max." As Max padded over to inspect the newcomer, Grace's eyes narrowed slightly. "Morgan? That your married name?" "Yes, well, soon to be ex-name, I suppose. My maiden name is Patterson." "Hmm." Grace seemed to be studying her face with unusual intensity. "You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago. Ever been to these parts before?" "Never. I'm from Massachusetts originally." "Interesting." Grace handed over the pie. "Well, welcome to Pinewood. Not much to the town, but the mountains make up for it." She glanced at the cabin. "You've got your work cut out for you with old Thomas's place." "Thomas? Was that the previous owner?" Something flickered across Grace's face. "In a manner of speaking, died about 3 years back. Place has been empty since." She turned to leave, then paused. "Word of advice, start with the roof. Rain's coming next week. Have you ever made an impulsive decision that changed your life forever? Let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to see what happens next." Over the next few days, Ellie established a routine. Mornings were spent clearing debris, afternoons cataloging what could be salvaged. She slept in a tent pitched in the main room, unwilling to trust the bedroom's water-stained ceiling. Max appointed himself guardian of the property, patrolling the perimeter with dignified purpose. The cabin slowly revealed itself beneath layers of neglect. Ellie discovered a small room off the main bedroom that must have belonged to a child. A twin bed frame with a faded quilt, a small dresser with peeling paint, a bookshelf containing weathered children's books from the 1960s. On the highest shelf stood a hand-carved wooden horse, its craftsmanship extraordinary. Flowing mane, detailed musculature, even tiny horseshoes on its hooves. Turning it over, she found an inscription. "For my little wanderer, may you always find your way home. Love. Daddy." Another discovery came while cleaning a battered armchair by the fireplace. As Ellie lifted the cushion, something fluttered to the floor. A photograph, its edges worn soft with handling. She picked it up, squinting in the dim light. A young woman stood before the cabin, her posture straight and proud despite her visibly pregnant belly. She wore bell-bottom jeans and a flowing embroidered top, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Around her neck hung a distinctive pendant, a silver crescent moon with a small star dangling from its curve. Ellie's hands began to tremble. The pendant was unmistakable, identical to the one nestled in her jewelry box, given to her by her mother on her 16th birthday. "A family heirloom," her mother had said. "Very special to me." But it was the woman's face that made Ellie sink slowly to the floor, the photograph clutched in her suddenly nerveless fingers. The high cheekbones, the slight asymmetry of the smile, the dimple in the right cheek. She knew this face intimately. It was her mother, a much younger version of Abigail Patterson Morgan, standing in front of this very cabin decades ago. Ellie's mind reeled. Her mother had never mentioned Oregon, never spoke of mountains or cabins or communities. According to family lore, Ellie had been born in Boston, where her parents had met at a university function. Her father, James Morgan, had been a professor of American history, her mother a librarian, a conventional love story in a conventional setting. Yet here was proof of something else entirely. That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. The photograph lay on the table beside her, illuminated by her lantern's glow. Max sensed her disquiet, pressing his warm bulk against her side. Outside, an owl called plaintively, its cry echoing across the valley. Morning brought determination. Ellie began a more systematic search of the cabin, looking for anything that might explain her mother's connection to this place. In the small bedroom, she noticed that one floorboard near the wall seemed slightly different from the others. The grain didn't quite match, the color a shade darker. She pried it up with a screwdriver and reached into the cavity beneath. Her fingers touched leather, and she carefully extracted a book, a journal, its binding worn but intact, the pages yellowed with age. On the inside cover, written in handwriting she instantly recognized, Abigail Winters, 1968. Winters, her mother's maiden name. With trembling fingers, Ellie opened to the first page. "Today we arrived at New Peace. Thomas says this land will heal us all, and I want so desperately to believe him. The valley spreads below us like a promise, the mountains standing guard against the world we've left behind. 7 families, 23 souls in all, united by a vision of something better, a life of intention, not consumption, of peace, not war. If only my parents could see me now, their perfect daughter, the straight A student, living in a half-built cabin with no electricity or running water. But when Thomas looks at me, I see myself reflected in his eyes, brave, capable, revolutionary. For the first time in my life, I feel truly alive." Ellie read until the light faded, consumed by her mother's words. The journal chronicled the birth and growth of a community called New Peace, founded by Vietnam War protesters environmental activists, and artists seeking escape from what they viewed as a corrupted society. Her mother had arrived in 1968, a 20-year-old college dropout searching for meaning amid national turmoil. And then there was Thomas Bennett, passionate, charismatic, visionary, the architect of new peace and clearly of her mother's heart. Page after page detailed their growing love, their shared dreams, their plans for the future. Thomas had built this cabin with his own hands, every beam, every joint, every detail crafted as a testament to his love for Abigail. As night fell fully, Ellie reached the final entries from early 1973. The tone had shifted dramatically. Fear had replaced hope. Paranoia had eroded peace. The FBI had begun investigating the community, suspicious of their anti-war activities. Thomas had become a primary target due to his outspoken criticism of the government and his past participation in protests. The final entry, dated March 18, 1973, was scrawled hastily, the handwriting jagged with emotion. FBI raided at dawn. Jack tried to run. There was a struggle, a gunshot. They're saying it was an accident, but Jack is dead. They've taken Thomas away in handcuffs. Everyone is scattering, running back to the world they once rejected. I have nowhere to go, no family who would understand. But I must leave this place. I must protect the life growing inside me, my baby, our baby. Thomas doesn't even know. God forgive me, but I have to disappear. For her sake, for our daughter's sake. Ellie sat in stunned silence. The journal opened in her lap. The timeline was undeniable. Her mother had been pregnant in March 1973. Ellie had been born in November of that year. Thomas Bennett was her father. Everything she had believed about herself, about her origins, her identity, her family, had been built on carefully constructed lies. Her entire existence had been shaped by events she'd never known occurred, in a place she'd never known existed, involving people she'd never heard named. A knock at the door startled her from her shocked reverie. It was Grace, her expression grave. "Thought you should know," she said without preamble. "Sunrise Timber's been buying up parcels all around here. They'll be coming for your place next, offering good money. But don't you believe their promises. They clear-cut everything they touch." As Grace spoke, Ellie's mind raced. How much did this woman know? Had she been part of New Peace? Had she known Thomas? Known her mother? But before she could frame a question, Grace was already retreating into the twilight, calling over her shoulder, "Check the missing pages. Not everything that's torn is lost." Ellie stared after her, then looked down at the journal. Only then did she notice. Several pages had been carefully removed, the edges ragged where they'd been torn from the binding. The mystery of her origins had only begun to unfold. The next morning dawned misty and cool. Ellie sat on the porch, clutching a mug of steaming coffee, the journal open beside her. Max lay at her feet, occasionally lifting his head to monitor a squirrel's progress across the clearing. The forest was awakening. Birds called to one another. Unseen creatures rustled in the underbrush. A vehicle approached, tires crunching on gravel. A sleek black SUV, out of place in these rustic surroundings, pulled up beside her truck. A man emerged, tall, mid-50s, wearing an expensive hiking outfit that had clearly never seen a trail. His smile was practiced, reaching his mouth but not his eyes. "Ms. Morgan, Alexander Reed, Sunrise Timber." He extended a manicured hand. "Hope I'm not disturbing your morning." Ellie stood, leaving his hand unshaken. "What can I do for you, Mr. Reed?" If her coldness bothered him, he didn't show it. "I'll get right to the point. We're developing this area, sustainable lumber harvesting, followed by a high-end eco-resort. We've acquired most of the surrounding parcels." He named a figure that was double what she'd paid. "Cash offer. You could be back in civilization by the weekend." "I'm not interested in selling." Reed's smile tightened. Ms. Morgan, this cabin is barely habitable. Winter in these mountains is brutal. And once we begin operations, he gestured vaguely toward the surrounding forest. You'll find the solitude you're seeking will be compromised. Still not interested? Reed studied her for a long moment. You know, it's interesting. This is the only parcel the previous owner refused to sell as well. Must be something special about this place. His eyes flicked to the journal on the table. Or perhaps it's what's in it. A chill ran through Ellie that had nothing to do with the morning air. How could he know about the journal? About its contents? I think you should leave. Reed placed his business card on the railing. Think about the offer. It won't last indefinitely. He turned to go, then paused. Oh, and Ms. Morgan? I'd be careful about digging too deeply into this property's history. Some things are better left buried. After he departed, Ellie examined the journal more carefully. She discovered something she'd missed. A folded piece of paper tucked into the binding. Carefully extracting it, she unfolded a hand-drawn map of the surrounding area. 5 locations were marked with X's, including the cabin itself. One X, circled in red, was located near what appeared to be a waterfall. Ellie packed a small backpack with water, snacks, and the map. With Max trotting faithfully at her side, she set off into the forest. The trail was overgrown but still discernible, winding between towering pines and across small streams. After an hour's hike, she heard it, the musical sound of falling water. The trail curved sharply, and suddenly the waterfall appeared, a silver ribbon cascading over moss-covered rocks into a clear pool below. Checking the map, Ellie located the exact spot marked with the red-circled X, a small cave behind the waterfall. She carefully made her way across slippery rocks, Max whining anxiously from the shore. Behind the curtain of water was a shallow recess in the rock face, and there, pushed far back where no casual explorer would find it, sat a metal box. The box was weathered but intact, its contents protected from the elements. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon. All were addressed to Abigail Winters, and all were from Thomas Bennett. Ellie settled on a sun-warmed rock and began to read. The letters spanned from 1968 to 1974, chronicling a love story that took her breath away. Thomas wrote with passion and poetry about their life together, their dreams for the community, their hopes for changing the world. He described in detail the cabin he was building for them, the special wood he'd selected for the bedroom floor, the stones he'd gathered from the riverbed for the fireplace, the window he'd positioned to catch the morning light, so that every day would begin with brightness. The later letters grew increasingly concerned about FBI surveillance, but Thomas remained determined. They can watch us, but they cannot see us, he wrote. They look but do not understand what we're building here. Not just structures, but a new way of being human together. The final letter, dated December 1974, more than a year after Ellie's birth, made her hands shake so violently she nearly dropped it into the pool. My dearest Abigail, I've searched everywhere. Boston, New York, Chicago, San Francisco. No one from the old community will tell me where you've gone. They're afraid, and I understand that. But I cannot give up, not when I know you're out there somewhere with our child. The FBI finally cleared me of all charges, though they took nearly a year of my life. There was never any evidence because there was never any crime, just people trying to live peacefully in accordance with their beliefs. I've returned to our cabin, to the home we made together. I'll continue my research here. The plants we discovered on this land have remarkable properties. They may hold the key to treating the genetic condition that runs in your family. Remember how worried you were about passing it to our child? I won't stop until I find a treatment, and I won't stop looking for you both. If you ever read this, know that I love you. Know that I'll wait. For however long it takes, I'll be here. All my love always, Thomas. Ellie sat motionless, tears streaming down her face. Her mother had suffered from a rare genetic form of malignant hypertension, the same condition that had been diagnosed in Ellie at 30. The condition had claimed her mother's life at just 62. All these years, Ellie had believed the experimental treatment that had controlled her symptoms was developed by a pharmaceutical company. Had it actually originated from her biological father's research? And he had searched for them for years, perhaps decades. While her mother had built a new life with James Morgan, Thomas Bennett had remained faithful to a memory, devoted to a child he'd never met. Have you ever discovered a family secret that made you question everything you thought you knew? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to our channel to see what happens next. Returning to the cabin, Ellie found signs of intrusion. Drawers left slightly open, books rearranged on shelves. Nothing seemed to be missing, but the violation was clear. More disturbing was Max's behavior. He limped slightly and growled at the darkening forest, his usual good nature replaced by watchful anxiety. Grace appeared as twilight fell, bearing a casserole and concern in equal measure. "Saw Reed's car here this morning," she said, settling at the kitchen table, while Ellie served them both on mismatched plates. "He make you an offer?" "How did you know about Thomas's research?" Ellie asked directly, ignoring the question. Grace's fork paused halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully. "So you found the letters?" "And the journal. I know my mother was Abigail Winters. I know Thomas Bennett was my biological father. What I don't know is why a timber company executive seems very interested in that fact." The older woman sighed deeply. "It's not you they're interested in, dear. It's what grows here." She gestured toward the surrounding forest. Thomas discovered a plant, a type of moss that grows only in this valley. He believed it contained compounds that could treat certain genetic conditions. He was a brilliant botanist, you know. Before he came here, he taught at Berkeley. "Like mother, like daughter," Ellie murmured. Her own academic career in botany seemed less coincidental now. "The FBI investigation was never really about anti-war activities," Grace continued. "That was just the excuse. What they were truly interested in was Thomas's research. Certain pharmaceutical companies had government contracts worth millions. A natural compound that could treat genetic diseases? That would have disrupted everything. And Reed? Sunrise Timber? Pharmaceutical companies diversify. Timber rights give them access to anything that grows in these forests." Grace's eyes were sharp in her lined face. Thomas protected this land until his dying day. He knew what was at stake. The next morning, Ellie hiked to the second location marked on the map. There, in a sun-dappled clearing, she found a small experimental garden, remarkably still thriving, despite years of neglect. Careful stone borders marked different growing sections, each containing what appeared to be variations of the same plant. A delicate moss with distinctive blue-green coloration. Beneath a stone slab was a waterproof container holding Thomas's research journals. Detailed notes on cultivation methods, extraction techniques, and treatment protocols. The scientific value was immediately apparent to Ellie's trained eye. This wasn't just a potential treatment for one condition. The compounds Thomas had identified could revolutionize approaches to numerous genetic disorders. The research represented decades of painstaking work, all conducted without institutional support or funding. As she studied the notes, her phone rang, a rarity given the spotty service in the mountains. It was her mother's neighbor in Portland. "Ellie, it's Margaret. Your mother's had a stroke. She's in Portland General. The doctors are saying, well, you should come quickly." The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Despite the secrets, despite the lies, Abigail was still her mother, the woman who had raised her, loved her, shaped her life in countless ways. Ellie had to go, but leaving meant abandoning the cabin and all its secrets to Reed and Sunrise Timber's machinations. With no other choice, she packed an overnight bag and asked Grace to look after Max in the cabin. "Don't let anyone in," she instructed, "and if Reed comes back, tell him I'm meeting with environmental lawyers about the property." The drive to Portland took 3 hours, each mile increasing the distance between Ellie and the truth she'd only begun to uncover. The hospital corridors were a harsh contrast to the forest's serenity, antiseptic, fluorescent, echoing with subdued conversations and occasional alarms. She found her mother in the ICU, diminished beneath a tangle of tubes and wires. At 83, Abigail had maintained a remarkable vitality, still living independently, still gardening, still volunteering at the local library. Now she looked ancient, her skin translucent, her breathing shallow and mechanically assisted. "Mom," Ellie whispered, taking the fragile hand in hers. "I'm here." Abigail's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening with recognition. She tried to speak, but the oxygen mask made it impossible. Instead, she squeezed Ellie's hand, weakly but deliberately. "I know, Mom," Ellie said softly. "I found the cabin. I know about Thomas." A single tear escaped the corner of Abigail's eye, trailing down her temple into her silver hair. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ellie asked, her own eyes filling. "All these years." Abigail lifted a trembling hand to remove her oxygen mask, despite Ellie's protest. "To protect you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They would have watched you your whole life. James, he helped me disappear. He was kind. He loved us both. He made sure the treatments reached you when you needed them." "Treatments? From Thomas?" Abigail nodded slightly. "Your father never stopped trying to save you, even from a distance." The revelation was staggering. Her father, James Morgan, the man who had raised her, had maintained a secret connection to her biological father. Two men unknown to each other, both loving her in their different ways. "Thomas found us when you were 12, Abigail continued, each word an effort. "Your condition was worsening. The doctors had no answers. James contacted him in desperation. The medicine that saved you, it came from Thomas's research. Always." Ellie remembered the mysterious experimental treatments that had appeared just when conventional medicine had failed her. The pills without pharmaceutical markings. The improvements that had baffled her doctors. "James made me promise never to tell you. It was his condition for helping us. That you would never know you weren't his. That you would never be drawn into the danger that surrounded Thomas." A nurse appeared, gently but firmly replacing the oxygen mask. "She needs to rest," she told Ellie. "You can come back in the morning." But Ellie knew, with a daughter's intuition, that there might not be a morning. She leaned close to her mother's ear. "I forgive you," she whispered, "and I'm going to protect his legacy. I promise." Abigail's eyes held hers for one long moment, filled with decades of unspoken love and regret. Then they drifted closed, her breathing settling into a more regular rhythm. As Ellie left the hospital, her phone rang again. It was Grace, her voice tight with urgency. "You need to come back right away. Sunrise Timber has brought equipment in. They're planning to clear the forest near Thomas's research garden tomorrow morning. Reed claims they have permits for the entire area, except your cabin itself." Ellie felt a cold determination settle over her. "I'm on my way." Dawn was breaking as Ellie's truck crested the final hill. The eastern sky blushed pink, silhouetting the mountains against its glow. Exhaustion pulled at her, but determination pushed back harder. She hadn't slept, driving straight through the night from Portland. The scene that greeted her sent ice through her veins. Heavy machinery lined the forest edge. Bulldozers, excavators, logging trucks. Workers in hard hats and safety vests milled about, receiving instructions from a man she recognized immediately. Alexander Reed stood at the center of the activity, pointing toward the section of forest that contained Thomas's experimental garden. Ellie parked haphazardly and strode toward him. Max bounding from Grace's cabin to join her. His earlier injury apparently healed enough for him to resume his protective duties. "This is private property," she called, her voice carrying across the clearing. "You have no right to be here." Reed turned, unsurprised by her arrival. "Actually, Ms. Morgan, we have every right. Your deed covers the cabin and precisely 2 acres surrounding it. This," he gestured expansively at the forest, "belongs to Sunrise Timber now." "You know exactly what you're doing," Ellie said, stepping closer. "This isn't about lumber. It's about Thomas Bennett's research." A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed Reed's face. "You've been busy, but it changes nothing. The permits are approved. The work begins today." "Not without an environmental impact study," came a new voice. A woman in her 40s approached, a press badge hanging around her neck. "Judy Chen, Pinewood Gazette. Small paper, but we have a robust online presence." She held up a recording device. "Care to comment on why Sunrise Timber is bypassing standard environmental protocols for old-growth forest harvesting?" Grace had materialized beside Ellie, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I took the liberty of calling a few people," she murmured. Reed's confident demeanor faltered slightly. "This is a private business matter." "Actually," Ellie interrupted, "it's a matter of public interest, especially when the real goal is to acquire a potentially revolutionary medicinal plant that only grows in this specific ecosystem." She turned to the reporter. "I'd be happy to show you the research documentation. My biological father spent decades studying a unique moss species here that effectively treats several genetic disorders. Research that certain pharmaceutical interests might find disruptive to their profit margins." Reed's face hardened. "That's speculation and hearsay. The research journals in my possession are neither," Ellie countered. "And I believe the Endangered Species Act provides specific protections for unique ecosystems containing plants with medicinal properties. Would you like to test that in court, Mr. Reed? With media attention?" The standoff stretched for several tense moments. Finally, Reed signaled to his crew. "Stand down for now. Pack up the equipment." To Ellie, his voice lowered. "This isn't over. The board won't just walk away from this acquisition." "I'm not asking them to walk away," Ellie said. "I'm proposing a different approach. Sustainable research rather than destruction. A partnership rather than theft. Sometimes those who love us most make sacrifices we never see. Have you ever discovered a sacrifice someone made for you that you never realized? Share your feelings and subscribe to our channel to see the conclusion of this touching story." The final location marked on Thomas's map led Ellie to a small cabin deeper in the forest, accessible only by a nearly invisible trail. Unlike her cabin, this one had been meticulously maintained. The roof solid, the windows intact, the small porch swept clean. This was where Thomas Bennett had lived out his final years, just 5 miles from the home he had built for Abigail. The interior was spare but comfortable, a single room with a bed, table, chairs, and a wood stove. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with scientific texts, botanical references, and notebooks. The opposite wall stopped Ellie in her tracks. Photographs, dozens of them. Her mother as a young woman. The New Peace community gathered for meals. The cabin under construction. And then, most heartbreakingly, photographs of Ellie herself. Ellie at a college graduation. Ellie receiving an award. Ellie at academic conferences. All taken from a distance, all showing her unaware of the photographer. And letters. Stacks of them, addressed to Abigail Morgan, all marked "Return to Sender" or "Addressee Unknown." On the table lay a leather-bound journal, open to its final entry, dated just 3 weeks before Thomas's death. "My dearest daughter, whom I have loved from afar for 54 years. If you are reading this, then you have found your way home at last. I always believed you would someday. There is a symmetry to life that even science cannot fully explain, a pattern of departures and returns, of losses and discoveries. I want you to know that I have never blamed your mother for her choice. Fear is a powerful force, and in those days, there was much to fear. She protected you the only way she knew how. And James Morgan, though a stranger to me, must have been a good man to have raised such a remarkable daughter. I've followed your career with immense pride. Your work in botanical conservation carries forward the values that brought us all to this mountain so long ago. The research in these journals represents my life's work, but it is now yours. Use it as you see fit. The plants will guide you as they have guided me. Know that you have been loved every day of your life, by your mother, by the father who raised you, and by me, the father who had only glimpses and hopes. Love does not require recognition to exist. It simply is. Always your father, Thomas. Ellie sank to her knees, the journal clutched to her chest, sobs racking her body. Max pressed against her, whining softly, offering comfort in the only way he knew. That evening, a tentative agreement was reached with Sunrise Timber. The company would establish a research foundation in Thomas Bennett's name, with Ellie as scientific director. The unique ecosystem would be preserved, with sustainable harvesting of the medicinal moss under strict protocols. Reed, it transpired, had been the anonymous buyer of some of Thomas's early research, sold by a desperate community member after the FBI raid. He had spent years trying to recreate the results without access to the specific plants that grew only here. 2 days later, Ellie returned to Portland. She sat by her mother's bedside, holding the frail hand in hers. Abigail drifted in and out of consciousness, but in her lucid moments, Ellie shared everything she had discovered. "He never stopped loving you," Ellie told her, "and he never stopped trying to protect me, even from a distance." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "I made so many mistakes," she whispered. "You made difficult choices in impossible circumstances," Ellie corrected gently. "And so did James. And so did Thomas. All of you were trying to do what was right. Forgive me for not telling you. There's nothing to forgive, but there is something I want to give you." Ellie removed the silver crescent moon pendant from around her own neck, the one her mother had given her years ago, and fastened it around Abigail's neck. "He kept a picture of you wearing this, all those years." Abigail's fingers found the pendant, a smile of remembrance softening her features. "Thomas gave this to me the day we moved into the cabin. He said it represented hope, light persisting even in darkness." 3 days later, Abigail Morgan passed peacefully in her sleep, the crescent moon pendant clutched in her hand. Ellie had it buried with her, a symbol of a love that had endured across decades of separation. A year passed. The cabin, her cabin now in every sense, had been transformed. The roof no longer sagged. The windows gleamed in the sunlight. The porch stood solid and welcoming. Inside, Thomas's research had been organized and expanded upon. Ellie had taken a sabbatical from her university position to continue his work, already producing promising results that had the medical community buzzing with excitement. The research foundation was thriving, with a small laboratory established in Pinewood. Reed, surprisingly, had become a valuable ally, his business acumen complementing Ellie's scientific expertise. On a golden autumn evening, Ellie sat on the porch, a cup of tea steaming beside her. Max dozed at her feet, gray muzzle resting on paws, occasionally twitching in doggy dreams. The garden she had planted, using seeds found in Thomas's stores, bloomed with late-season color. Along the edge, a new addition, 7 white rose bushes, planted in memory of the original families of New Peace. In the cabin behind her, her mother's journal sat on the mantel beside Thomas's final letter to her. 2 lives that had intersected briefly but profoundly, Two loves that had shaped her existence in ways she was only beginning to understand. Ellie touched the wooden horse that now stood on the porch railing. For my little wanderer, may you always find your way home. And she had found her way home, though the path had been long and winding. Home to a truth that was complex and painful, but also beautiful. Home to a legacy that would help others for generations to come. Home to herself, daughter of Abigail and Thomas, botanist, healer, keeper of stories. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting the valley in shades of gold and amber, Ellie smiled. Above the door of the cabin, she had carved a new inscription. Love persists beyond time, heals beyond wounds, and always finds its way home. In the gathering twilight, surrounded by the forest that had sheltered 3 generations of her family, Eleanor Morgan was at peace.